Hi there guys, today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about using the table saw here. I know a lot of people get intimidated by using a table saw, and to be honest it can be fairly dangerous if you don't know what you're doing, but I think with a little bit of practice and common sense a table saw is by far the most versatile tool in the shop. Today what we're going to learn how to do are cross cuts, rip cuts, and how to use a table saw sled. The first cut we're going to go with is a rip cut, but before we get into any cuts, first of all, make sure you got on your safety glasses. What a rip cut is where you're actually cutting the board with the grain. Alright, the first thing I like to do when I'm making a rip cut is I like to set my blade just a smidgen higher than the wood that I'm cutting. Reason being, if I ever have an accident and I do get my fingers too close to the blade, if I cut my hand, I'm only going to cut my hand a little bit, as opposed to, if you have your blade set way up here, I mean, you could literally take off an entire finger, or hand for that matter. Now that I have my blade set where I want it to be, now I'm going to have to move my fence to whatever dimension that I want to cut my lumber. So once you have your fence set where you want it, you lock it into place and you get ready for the cut. Now when you're making a rip cut, one of the things you always want to remember is when you're pushing through, you also want to be pushing up against the fence and try to keep it flush with the fence here as you're pushing through. Now with a piece like this, I have plenty of room to slide my hand through without getting too close to the blade. If I didn't have that much room, the other option that I would have is some sort of push stick. Now this push stick here not only pushes, if you see, it has that little lip on the bottom so it pushes forward, but it also has a lot of material up front so I can push down on it as I'm pushing it forward. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and run a rip cut. Now if you notice, as I was making the rip cut, I stepped to the side a little bit as I was running my piece through like this. Reason being, if you ever get kickback and the piece ends up flying up this way, and there is always a chance that you'll get some sort of kickback. If you're standing right behind it, you always have the chance of it hitting you in the face or in the body. Well, it's not going to feel good either way. Whereas if you're standing to the side a little bit, either way, as I'm running through, if per chance she was to kick back on you, you have a better chance of it missing. Alright, now let's jump into the next cut. The next cut we're going to do is going to be the cross cut. Every table saw that you get is going to come with a miter gauge, and that's the easiest way to start making cross cuts. Slides right in here. Mine has a little, fits in a little T-style track. And it fits right in your table saw, and you basically, you press your lumber right up against the miter gauge and you run it through. Now that's how you're going to make a cross cut. Now the other thing that you can do with a miter gauge is you can make different angles. If you look closely at the miter gauge, you can see it tilts. You got 15, it's got these positive stops, 30, 45, and then anywhere in between. And then you just tighten that up. Make sure that it's at a perfect 0, and then you can get your 90-degree cuts. So let's go ahead and make a cross cut here. Alright, the other way to make a cross cut on a table saw is to use what's called a table saw sled. Now you can make one out of plywood and some hardwood, or you can go to the store and buy one. I bought the Incra. It came with the, it's got the special miter gauge on it, and I really like this one. But you can make one just as good if you're just making one out of plywood. The advantage of using a table saw sled is you're basically sliding the lumber right on the table. So there's not as much chance for the lumber to bind and to get any sort of kickback. I would say I make about 99% of my cuts on a table saw sled. So let's go ahead and show you how to use the table saw sled. And again, basically you just push it up against here, mark your mark and figure out where you're going to cut, and table saw sled is by far the safest way to use a table saw if you're making a crosscut as well. Now that's about it, guys, for today as far as the table saw goes. Now granted, there's a whole lot of other different cuts that you can make on a table saw and a whole lot of other stuff that you can do once you get a little bit more advanced. But as far as your basic table saw skills, I think that's about all you need to do to get out in the shop and start cutting and start making some projects. If anyone has any questions or comments regarding today's video and wants to know something a little bit more in detail, just leave me a comment and I'll make another video that goes into a little bit more detail about something that I left out. And please remember to wear your safety glasses and be safe when you're using your table saw. You guys have a great day. And if you're interested in seeing some of our custom wood signs or other unique one-of-a-kind pieces, check us out on Facebook at Helen Drunk's Custom Wood Designs.